What I want to talk to you guys about is literally the treatment process. And I want to talk about that from actually beginning right up until the family education program and the point that we're moving patients on to their next level of care and or returning home. And when I say the beginning, I want to speak just a little bit about interventions and what if you are facilitating as a coach to get a family into an intervention, the very, very, very first thing that has to happen in an intervention is eliminate the family denial, because all of us kind of come to the table with our own ideas and beliefs about addiction, how it happens, why it's happening to this individual. And I think the mistake that a lot of us make is we assume, okay, the family gets it. And a lot of time the family doesn't get it. What's the family signing up for? They're signing up for the madness to stop. They're not actually signing up for recovery because they don't know what that means. They just want the madness to stop. And you could literally be deceived by the patient who also wants the madness to stop. They're not signing up for recovery. Recovery is hard emotional work. So when a person is coming into treatment or a family's coming to you and they want to get their loved one into treatment, they're not standing on your doorstep saying to you, listen, I want to get signed up for some really difficult emotional work. How do I do that? What they're really saying to you is, how do we make the madness stop? So the first part of the intervention is to eliminate denial. And how you eliminate denial is with facts. And what you want to eliminate first is all of the things that do not cause addiction. So one of those chief things when you're talking about a family is that bad parenting doesn't cause addiction, because guilt is a major barrier to getting your child help. So first things first, what am I thinking? If my child is having this big of a problem in life, I must not be a good parent. Well, my first question is, do I want to expose that to the entire world that I'm a horrible parent? And the reason I'm a horrible parent, look how badly my child is doing at life. So I'm going to struggle a little bit with that. So if you're coaching a family into that early intervention, the first thing you want to do is eliminate that myth that addiction comes from bad parenting. So you must have done something wrong, or you didn't do something that your child needed. And as a result of that, you have this person now that's struggling with addiction. Now, another one, which is actually a favorite of lots of parents, and the reason it's a favorite of lots of parents is because it's half true. And what I mean is, my child uses because of the people they hang out with. And the reason I say it's half true is the truth is they hang out with those people because they use. So the reverse is actually true. So it's not because I'm hanging out with Joe Schmo, I get high. I hang out with Joe Schmo because we get high. So that's the reason that Joe's really my friend. And parents believe at that point sometimes, if I could just get them away from these bad people, then they'll be okay. And the reality is, unless that thinking process change, which is what recovery entails, they're actually not going to be okay. So it's important that when you get ready to start an intervention, the first thing you want to do is explore the parent and or family belief system. What do they believe has gone wrong here? What do they believe is not working? Because a lot of times, another one of those false myths, and then we're going to dive into treatment, addiction, and families, but another one of those false myths is the illusion of abstinence will solve this problem. Now, abstinence is necessary, but it's not sufficient, meaning a person has to stop using drugs and or alcohol in order to recover. So Recovery is actually the goal. Abstinence is not the goal. But as I stated, abstinence is necessary, but not sufficient. So that's, again, another one of those false belief systems that happen from time to time, where people are believing quite simply that I just got to get them to stop using drugs or alcohol. If I could just get them to stop, everything would be all right. And the truth is far from true. So really important that one of the messages that you're sending a family that is interested in an intervention is the journey. So you want to really begin sharing with them what this means for your family. That recovery really is a family disease, and we have all been affected by this disease. And there are changes that we are all going to have to make in order for us to create a safe environment for this individual to recover. Now, I have to say to you guys, I can say that really quickly and I can say it really easy, but I want to assure you that is a tall task. Getting every family on board with committing to making the changes necessary in order to create a safe environment is not an easy thing. And that's the reason that you want to start each intervention with exploring the family belief system. So you recognize as a clinician, what is the work that's going to be necessary here to create a safe environment for this family, not just for the individual that is recovering, but for this family. Now, having said that, guys, say we do a successful intervention. We meet with the family agrees. We understand that addiction is the problem. We understand our child needs treatment. We understand this is more than simply trying to get the madness to stop. And we're prepared to go forward with the process. At the point at which an individual enters into treatment at Karen, what we do is put together what would be considered a comprehensive treatment plan for that individual. So they will meet with the psychologist, they'll meet with the psychiatrist, they'll meet with their counselor, and they'll go through an array of other groups where they're having meetings. And sometimes they might not even know that it's an interview that's going on while all of this is happening. So that usually takes us somewhere around 5 days into treatment. So about 5 days into treatment, we're ready to make what would be considered an accurate diagnosis as to what are the issues that need to be addressed in order to create a safe, long-term recovering environment for a family. Now, what I like to do, and Daniel did a really good job, what I like to do is bring that down to earth. So when I talk to families, what I try not to do is tell them, look, I'm not going to take you back to biology class. I'm not going to take you back to psychology class. What I'm going to do is share with you what addiction looks like in your living room so that you could actually feel confident in making a diagnosis. So you could say to yourself, you know what? That's exactly what I see. Now, what you guys do is important in that you want to understand all the stuff I'm not trying to make a family understand. And for a couple of different reasons. One, I got 6 minutes to give them this information. So I can't take them back to psychology class and make them understand everything that makes their child tick and everything that makes them respond to the way their child ticks. So I take them through a very simple process of simply understanding addiction. When families come into the family education program, I share with them simply a 3-phase model of addiction: early, middle, and late phases. And what I ask them to look for as I go through that process are the things in there, the changes that you saw happening for your child. And this is not yet about them, but we'll get to the family themselves and the changes that happen for them. But for an individual that engages in using, first and foremost, it is normal for an adolescent to experiment with drugs and or alcohol. Now, what's really important is that you define normal. Normal does not mean good. What normal means is the expected response. So I expected that to happen. So if you give them an opportunity to do something they're not supposed to do, they're going to do it. And only for one reason. This has nothing to do with addiction. What's the real reason that people use drugs and alcohol? Because they're not supposed to. There's a certain mystique that just comes with getting away, with doing something you're not supposed to do. It's like, I got away with that. I'm going to do that again. Now, the reality is in that early and or first phase or that experimental process, what do individuals experiment with? For the most part, they experiment with whatever is most readily available. Easiest thing to get my hands on. Why? I'm not invested at this stage of the game. This isn't addiction, so I'm not spending a lot of time, money, energy, and or effort to get these things. A lot of times it may be alcohol found in the homes of family and or friends. Increasingly nowadays, it's become prescription drugs found in the homes of family and or friends, meaning that children are not worse than they used to be. What's changed is they have more access than they used to have. See, there's only a couple of people that's on this WebEx that's as old as I am. But when I was a kid, there was nothing in the medicine cabinet that you wanted. Literally, I mean, stuff in the medicine cabinet was like mercurochrome and castor oil. There was nothing in there that you were interested in finding. Today, there are over 250 prescription drugs alone that adolescents abuse on a regular basis. But what's the other important thing they have access to? They have access to information that we did not have when we were children. So they could go online and research literally prescriptions. So what's the effect this one has? What's the effect that one has? So now we're still in that early and or first phase. Now, what's really important for you guys to know when you're talking to parents, if your child's in the experimental phase, there's no such thing as overreacting to your child's experimentation. Why? No one knows how deadly their experimentation is going to be. So it's not as though the things that I'm experimenting with, even though I might not have crossed that line and become or gotten the diagnosis of addict or alcoholic, the things that I'm experimenting with are still extraordinarily dangerous. And unfortunately, some of them could kill me. So there's no such thing as overreacting to your child's experimentation. That will be a hurdle that you guys run up against, where parents will think, not that big of a deal. I did that when I was a kid and I turned out all right. And the real answer is no, you didn't. 90% of this stuff didn't even exist when you were a kid. So you didn't do that when you was a kid and you turned out all right. Guys, what we use, you could count on one hand. I just shared with you, there's over 250 prescription drugs. I didn't mention the research chemicals, the K2, the Molly, the bath salts, the wax, the moon rocks, and I could go on forever with different names, and the easy access that children have to these. They come now in the oil form. They can be smoked in a vape cigarette, and sometimes adolescents will use the form of manipulation and share them with their parents. Oh, this is just THC that I'm smoking in this vape. And parents, again, thinking, I might have smoked a little marijuana when I was a kid, not that big of a deal. Don't need to like overreact to this. And the reality is times have changed, and just about everything that your children can experiment with today can potentially be deadly. So really important that they're understanding that. Now, at some point in that early and or first phase, what actually happens? An individual finds what would be referred to as their drug of choice. And all that means is this is the one that does it for me. And what is it? It creates the illusion of safety and or comfort. I feel safe and comfortable. In fact, Dr. Daniel just shared with you guys that cycle of addiction where they become obsessed. And what am I obsessed with? I'm not actually obsessed with the drug. What am I obsessed with? That illusion of safety and or comfort. I feel secure when I'm either hunting this drug, I got the drug, I'm using the drug, and I got plans to get more. And anybody or anything that interrupts that cycle literally becomes the enemy. So at the point that an individual finds their drug of choice, you'll see a bunch of changes begin to take place. One, they begin to personally identify themselves with the substance that they've chosen to use. Now, what's somewhat unique to your culture is I'm going to actually begin to sever my ties with your culture because I'm not like you guys. I'm like this. So their vocabulary will begin to reflect their drug of choice. Their wardrobe will begin to reflect their drug of choice. The music that they listen to will begin to reflect their drug of choice. And obviously, even the friends that they hang out with will begin to reflect their drug of choice. A large red flag goes up for parents when this begins to happen. I'm seeing the change. The problem with that flag, it only goes half mast. Because what am I telling myself? This is a normal change. All adolescents go through this. I'm not recognizing that there's a separation and connection that's going on. And I'm actually reconnecting to what would be considered an alternative culture. I'm signing up for that drug culture. And the hard part about this, the adolescent or the child themselves, the addict themselves, they don't even know they're signing up for the drug culture. It's much further down the line that they come to that realization, and the fear of letting that culture go starts to set in inside of that process of recovery. Once they do the personal identification, for most people, guys, and I want to remind you, we're still in that early end or first phase. For most people, obviously, there are natural consequences that come with using drugs and alcohol. So I could get really sick if I'm drinking too much and I'm vomiting and I'm waking up with a hangover. If I'm using other drugs, brain fog, disconnection, I'm like doing badly in school, maybe arguments at home. For the average person, the consequences that come from using drugs and or alcohol literally becomes that severing device. An individual that is not going to go on to become an addict or alcoholic, they begin to phase drugs, alcohol, their friends, and their activity out of their life. At the very least, they move them to what would be considered their proper perspective, meaning they will no longer hinder my forward progress. They're not going to stop me from going on and doing and being and becoming whatever it is I intend to be. For the addict or alcoholic, that transition never happens. They move from that early end or first phase of addiction into the second phase of addiction. Now, the second phase of addiction is an extraordinarily painful area, usually just for the loved one. It's not very painful for the addict or alcoholic at this time. They're just now starting to get their footing as far as addiction is concerned. I'm starting to get comfortable doing all the things that I'm doing, but it's a reshuffling of the value system because I can't maintain the value system that you gave me and use drugs and alcohol. And why would that be true? What's on the top of your value system? Honesty. I can't be honest and use drugs and alcohol. So I got to turn honesty into a bad thing. I got to turn trusting people into a bad thing. So all of those, what used to be positive, I got to make these bad. Now, how do you make them bad? Number one, if you tell the truth about where I was, what I was doing, who I was with last night, I'm going to be in some pretty serious trouble. And all of a sudden, you can't trust honest people. Honest people get you into trouble. So honesty really slowly starts to become a bad thing. And telling the truth is no longer good. Problem? Lying hits the top of the list. Lying literally becomes an asset. This is how I get everything I want. This is how I get out of all of the trouble that I would get into. Now, why did I say painful? How painful do you think this is for a parent? Hardest thing in the world for you to get your head and your heart wrapped around. My son, my daughter. You know what we think? If I don't say it out loud, it won't be true. So we don't say it. We just stare at them. Like I really internally, I can't believe that you're standing there. Look at me square in the face and lying. Very, very, very painful. Now, children, this is a real problem. parent's relationship with a child vastly different than a child's relationship with a parent. So a parent becomes committed to their child, and this is real fun, guys. How many of you realize that parents become committed to their children before their children are born? Right? So you don't even have a name, you don't have a face, you don't have a shape. Sometimes I'm committed to my child before I even pick the partner. I can't wait to get married and have kids. And I used to tease my wife about it. If you go shopping, you see a mom and they're in a little kids section where they sell clothes. And she picks up a dress. And she looks at the dress. She turns to whoever's shopping with her. She says, "Oh my goodness, isn't this cute?" And if you say to her, "Do you have a daughter?" She says, "No." But she's already dreaming about having a daughter and how she's going to take care of her and what she's going to buy for her. So when I say painful to parents, because your commitment is that deep, your commitment started before the child was ever born. I was committed to my children, and then they come, and I'm defending them before that I actually give birth. Any of the married people out there are aware of these arguments. Like, what color are we going to paint the room? What kind of furniture are we going to put in the room? And maybe about 7 months into the pregnancy, I'm debating whether or not I ever should have married you in the first place, because this ain't working out. And I teach you guys about that. But again, I'm defending you before you ever existed. You don't exist yet. And I'm already fighting for you. I'm in there doing everything I can to protect you and create a safe environment for you. So I say all of that, guys, to say, fast forward to 12, 13 years old. And I just stole $60 out of your wallet. You had 100, and I was nice enough not to take it all. I just took 60, and I kept walking around the house like everything was okay. And at the point that I notice that no one noticed that I took the money, I leave. I go buy drugs and I get high, and I come home late, and you're worried about me, and we fight about it, and we go to bed. And the next day, you realize that you're $60 short of what you thought you brought home in the ATM machine. And you first begin to question yourself, and then you begin to question family members. And at the point that you get to the child that actually took it, there's a spot in your heart where you know they took it, but you want to believe they didn't take it. And you start actually telling yourself, instead of the fact that my child, my son, my daughter, is a thief, my son, my daughter is a liar. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I didn't go to the bank. Maybe I really didn't take out that much money. And this is a process, guys. And the reason I share with you about the parents, because this is where enabling starts to set in for a parent. I'm defending your feelings. I'm worried about what you're going to feel like if I say you're a thief. I'm worried about what you're going to feel like if I say you are a liar. So again, I don't say it. I just kind of go on hoping that this is just a phase and it'll pass. But what's happened for my child? Lying, as I stated just a moment ago, guys, has become an asset. This is how I get everything I want. It's how I get out of all the trouble that I would get into. And unfortunately, everything beneath lying, what used to be positive authority figures, they don't fit there anymore. So my character starts to change. The teachers in the school become bad people. Hall monitors in the school become bad people. Police in the neighborhood become bad people. What used to be positive authority figures are now bad people. And I start sharing that with you. And as a parent, I'm defending my child. I'm in there kicking and screaming. You guys can't just say these things about my kid. Why, this is a good kid. And what's the problem for a parent? What's my reality? What do I remember? I remember them running home after school and giving me a kiss. I remember them telling me how much they love me. I remember them telling me how much they miss me. I remember them telling me how much they enjoyed the food that I cooked for them and time that I spent with them. I remember them telling me, even though they didn't understand what it meant, that they would never leave me. And this could not be that person. So parents over that first year or two of active addiction for their child really struggle emotionally, and enabling really does begin to set in. For the child, though, the addiction itself is growing. And I'm starting now to get into trouble. So now I don't just hate the teachers in the school. I don't just hate the hall monitors and the police. I'm starting not to like you because you're asking questions that I don't want to answer. And home becomes an uncomfortable place to be. I begin practicing avoidance at home. And guys, when I start practicing avoidance at home, the enabling gets worse. And it gets worse because what parents start to recognize is the intimacy in this relationship has died. I can't reach you anymore. Like there was a time that I could sit down and I could talk to you. I could explain to you my fears, my hopes, my dreams, and my aspirations for you. And you would get it. And we've gotten to a spot now where I sit down and I begin to share with you my fear, my frustration, my disappointment, and my hopes and dreams and aspirations. And at the end of that conversation, the child looks up, looks their parents square in the eye, and says to them, does that mean you're not going to give me the $20? And for the parent, that hits them like a ton of bricks. Like, you didn't hear nothing that we just said to you. And the answer is no. And for a parent, when I realize I'm losing my child, I'll do anything to get my kid back. I'll literally do anything. And this is part of that secret life for parents, because what do? I begin accepting unacceptable behavior a little bit at a time, not in each swaths, just a little bit.
Is that
Yes.
stage 2?
This is in stage 2, yes. We've crossed over at this point. And they begin accepting unacceptable behavior a little bit at a time. Now, unfortunately, the more unacceptable behavior you accept, the more unacceptable behavior I expect you to accept. In fact, they start holding it against you. Nobody said anything when I did this, and you guys always let me do that. And before you know it, instead of getting the child from down there back over here to where you are, what ultimately happens, you find yourself standing down there with them. And this one is equally as devastating, meaning one day the kid's walking through the house, there's nothing wrong. They got this puzzled look on their face, and you say to them, honey, what's wrong? And they look up at you and they say, please excuse my language, guys, I can't find my fucking sneakers. When did that language become an acceptable part of our lives? Like, that's not who we are. That's not how we live. And for the first time, for a parent, I'm realizing just how far down there we've gone. And it's terrifying because it's not like you just turn around and walk back to what you used to believe. I don't really know how to get back. So parents at this stage of the game are paralyzed with fear, disappointment, frustration, shame, and guilt. Like, who do I tell? My son has become a monster. Who do I tell that my daughter cannot be trusted? Because I'm realizing for the first time, I can't believe anything you say. So every night, I cry myself to sleep. And I cry myself to sleep twofold. Dads, this is a big deal for dads. Dads, you know what guys do? We fix things.
and I can't fix this freaking problem. So dads are crying themselves to sleep. They get angry at the sight of you because you remind them that they have not fixed this problem. Moms cry themselves to sleep out of fear, frustration, anger, disappointment, and self-loathing. I must be doing something wrong. And the reality is, there's a saying in Al-Anon. It's called the 3 C's. You didn't cause it, you can't cure it, and you can't control it. The most 3 frustrating things I ever heard before in my life. But the unfortunate thing is, it's a reality. You didn't cause it, so you don't want to blame yourself. Addiction is a brain disease. Their brain does not respond in the same fashion as everyone else to drugs and alcohol. People that do not have this disease, they experiment with drugs and alcohol, and then they move on with their life. So it's not a parent's fault. But the harder 2, guys, you can't cure it. No amount of hugs, kisses, accolades, stuff makes this. And every parent that struggles with a child with addiction, they do all of these. I'm gonna get you the latest phone. I'm gonna get you the sneakers you want. I'm gonna get you this. I'm gonna get you that. We love you. We care about you. We admire you. We do everything that we can to make them feel like a whole human being. And nothing that we do curbs that reality. And when that passes, guys, anger sets in. Now I'm really angry and I'm really frustrated. Now I'm contemplating homicide. Just don't tell anybody. I'm thinking the best thing I could probably do is kill this kid. Things are getting bad around here, and I'm not going to just put up with this. And it really gets frustrating with parents. And what do then? We try a disciplinary approach. So I'm going to take your phone away. I'm not going to let you go here. I'm not going to let you go there. I'm going to try to limit your access to A, B, C, X, Y, and Z, whatever that may be. And unfortunately, none of that works. At the bottom of that second phase of addiction, real trouble starts to set in. So I'm ending up in the emergency room once or twice as a result of overdose. I'm getting arrested now. So I'm not just having brushes with the law. I'm arrested. I got charges. I got to go to court. I'm literally, really a criminal. And this is a real struggle. And all of a sudden, home no longer feels safe. And it's a strange paradox because I don't feel safe when you're not at home. And I don't feel safe when you are home because I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know what you're in that room doing. I don't know what's going to happen to you. I'm afraid you might do something to someone else in the family. I don't mean like physically injure them, but you won't steal their stuff. You won't fight with them. You won't start problems here in the house. Peace has literally left our lives at this stage of the game. And this is the point at which most families begin to seek treatment. So early, when I talked about interventions, that's an early part. This is a part where intervention is no longer necessary. It's apparent to everybody. We get a major problem and we have to do something about it today, even though we don't understand what it is we have to do or how it works. We're gonna make some phone calls and we're taking you someplace and we get them into treatment. Now, when a patient enters in the treatment, we put them on blackout for 2 reasons. So they may go on blackout for the first week that they're in treatment. And the real reason for that blackout, just don't tell nobody I told you, is we're hoping that you get some sleep. you don't talk to them. They can't call you. We'll call you. We'll tell you how they're doing, but they can't call you and talk to them. We're hoping you get some rest because you probably haven't had any rest in quite some time. And we also want to begin to sever that relationship, meaning that addictive relationship that your child has with you. Because when I shared with you guys earlier that the intimacy in the relationship has died, what's that actually equal? So now on both sides, our relationship is one of manipulation. So it's a very unhealthy, manipulative relationship on both sides. You'd be amazed at the number of parents that literally lie to their children to get them into treatment. And they promise them things that they're not going to actually give them, or they have no intention of giving them if they go to treatment. So the parents are now engaged in this unhealthy form of manipulation with their child. And their child, for quite some time now, has been engaged in an unhealthy form of manipulation with their parents. And enabling is full blown. Now, what the goal of enabling when it's full blown? Just to maintain status quo. Now, what's really scary about that? Status quo is a dangerous reality. I'm getting high, but it's not in anybody's face. We're not yelling, screaming, shouting, or threatening. So we at least have what? A moment of peace. Ain't got no long-term peace. We got a moment of peace. So that enabling now is full blown, and parents just want to maintain that moment of peace. So I defend my child's behavior, even though it's inappropriate. For example, if my son is in treatment and he's sneaking over to the adult side of the campus and he's stealing cigarettes and he's bringing cigarettes back to the adolescent side of the campus, and he's smoking cigarettes with other patients that are in treatment, what would be my form of enabling? How bad is cigarettes? Now, the reality is the behavior is extraordinarily self-destructive, but I'm not seeing that. I'm thinking this is not that big of a deal. Why are you guys scrutinizing my child so heavily? This is not that big of a deal. I was worried about life and death before they got here, but I shared something with you guys earlier, and hope to God you was paying attention. So what did I share with you earlier, guys? The difference between abstinence and recovery. See, if my goal, which is part of enabling, is just that you stop getting high, I'm happy you're not getting high, but you're not recovering. You haven't changed. You're still self-destructive. So our life would be exactly the same as it always has been. That is enabling at its height. I'm willing to settle for that because you're not getting high, which is an inappropriate approach. Now, most of our patients, which are the clients that I work with, have not crossed from that second into the third phase of addiction. The third phase of addiction is mostly reserved for adults. By the time a person has reached the third phase of addiction, using drugs and alcohol is a way of life. But it's not just a way of life. It's the way of life that I've chosen for myself. And this is what I'm going to do, come hell or high water. And that's not true for our adolescent or young adult patients. They will threaten you with that. Oh, I'm running away. But what they need to know, right, or what parents need to know is running away from Karen is not a difficult task. It's not like the Great Escape. You ain't got to be Papillon to get away from treatment. All you got to do is get up and start walking. Now, they don't actually leave. They threaten to leave. Oh, you don't come and get me, I'm going to kill myself. Guys, somebody that's telling you they're going to kill yourself because they're angry doesn't want to die. Whatever it is they're angry about, they want that. Whatever that actually is. So that might be, I want you to come get me. That might be, I want this, I want that. But whatever I'm angry about and I'm threatening to kill myself, I want that thing. I don't actually want to end my life. Now, I'm going to say this to any person that's a lay person. Every threat of suicide you want to take seriously. But as a clinician, when I'm sitting in front of a child, I know the difference. I could tell somebody, in fact, what should you really be afraid of? Somebody that's been depressed for a really long time and they stop talking about killing themselves. What's that mean? I got a plan. And I think I know exactly how I'm going to work it out. So I'm pretty comfortable now. All right. I picked Wednesday next week at this time when nobody's around and this and that. So actually the next 2 days, I might be pretty good. And that's a scary thing. And like I said, as a clinician, I know the difference. So I want to say though, again, guys, you take every threat of suicide seriously, but I know the difference between the two. And that second one I share with you is far more frightening than that first one. And at this stage of the game, in that third phase of addiction, it usually takes some form of catastrophic event to get a person into treatment. Now, the reality is catastrophic is defined by the individual. So if I'm a dad and I got a young son, say he's 12, 13 years old, and my young son is my best friend. He's happy to see me every time I come home, gives me a hug. You know, we talk about our day. We talk about what I'm going to do for him. We talk about what he wants to do with me. And as a result of that dad's active addiction, his son is now afraid of him. And he doesn't want to spend any time with him. He avoids him. The realization of that for that dad could be that catastrophic event. So catastrophic, I only did that example because I want you to know catastrophic is defined by the individual. For some parents, that's not enough. Like that would not be a catastrophic event for every parent, but for some parents that would. Losing a job, losing a spouse, getting arrested, actually overdosing sometimes may be that catastrophic event. But third phase of addiction, when that catastrophic event takes place, the door opens for recovery. A person can enter into recovery at that stage of the game. Yes, go ahead.
When you say that is when the is defined by the person, you mean by the alcoholic or the drug user?
Yes, exactly. It's defined by the addict or alcoholic because it's different for every one of us. Like what is actually most important and my priorities in my life are actually going to dictate that for me. They may not be your priorities. You know, they may be very different. And lots of people think, and this is a sad one I'm about to say, say your wife says, you know, if you continue to use drugs and alcohol, I'm going to leave you. Well, there are people that ain't enough for me. My wife leaves and I keep getting high, or my husband leaves and I keep getting high. You know, like that's not enough for me, but they do have a priority in their life. We all have a category in our head of things that I will never do, things that never happen to me, things that would be unacceptable. But each individual creates that category for themselves. So no one can dictate what that is for any particular individual, but it does open the door for recovery when that emotional catastrophic event takes place. Again, for some people, it may be a near-death experience. You may be getting high with somebody and something happens and you know you almost lose your life as a result of your behavior, and that may be the thing that launches a person into recovery. But more importantly, guys, that covers that 3 phases of addiction and what that looks like. And hopefully what I just did with you guys was what I shared with you when I started. I try to draw a picture for people that they could say, yeah, that's what happened at my house, rather than think, okay, I got to go back to school and figure out the DSM criteria and, you know, what are all the dimensions? Does my family member meet those dimensions? They could literally say to themselves, holy crap, that was it. That's what happened to us. And I want to be able to give that to families so that they can feel comfortable with the diagnosis, with not having to go back to school to accept that diagnosis. Now, what's more important than that is at that point, allowing them to understand what it actually means to recover. Like, what is recovery? If abstinence is not the goal and the goal is recovery, what's it mean to recover? Recovery is an active change of attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs. Meaning, if this is not happening, I'm not recovering. I just haven't gotten high. What's the problem? I'm still someone that will get high. So when life shows up and gets extraordinarily uncomfortable for me again, I'll use again because my belief system hasn't changed. If you're an active using addict and or alcoholic, you are living your life through a self-destructive belief system. What's that mean? When bad things happen to me, I always do something to make it worse. So for the rest of us, right, when hurt will show up in front of you, some of us pause. So we wait a minute. Didn't expect this. How am I going to get over that? Some of us forge straight ahead. You know what? I'm not going to let anything stop me. Others will actually simply seek help. Oh my God, I don't know how to do that. I got to find somebody that can help me. But we're going.
What did you say? What did you say recovery is? Change in
recovery
attitude?
Is an active change of attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs. Those
Active
three things.
change.
And I'm going to go over each one of them for you guys to exactly why I would say that. Like, first and foremost, what would be the very first attitude necessary for recovery? Acceptance. This is my problem. This is my problem. Now, you guys don't want to misdefine acceptance as me being happy. I could be disappointed. I could be frustrated. I could be sad. I could be afraid, but I finally recognize this is what's wrong. So I'm not going to be overjoyed. I'm doing cartwheels because I've had an enlightenment. And this is a problem. Like, most of us think of enlightenment as some wonderful thing. Well, guys, if the enlightenment is, I'm a self-destructive person that could possibly kill myself if I don't get help, I'm not going to be happy about that. Oh my God. And parents go through the exact same process. By the time a parent is bringing their child into treatment, they have acceptance that my child has the disease of addiction. I'm turning them over to treatment. I'm spending an exorbitant amount of money to try and get some help for my kid. I have acceptance. I'm not happy that I'm doing this. In fact, I'm quite disappointed that it's come to this, but I have enough acceptance to recognize it's necessary. Now, what's the opposite of acceptance, guys, which will allow you to recognize I'm not recovering? Defiance. Yeah, nobody can make me do that. I don't have to do that. I'm not like everybody else. That's what they need. That's not what I need. You guys can't make me do this. This is not fair. It's not right. I'm defiant. I'm not really trying to hear what a recovering person has to do in order to recover. This is really fun, guys. How many of you realize that there are patients that are not addicts and alcoholics that have the exact same response to a medical diagnosis? How many people do you think sit in the doctor's office and he says to them, well, after all of our tests and you've got type 2 diabetes and you are going to have to stop eating tasty cakes. Now, this is a guy that goes to bed every night with a box of tasty cakes on his nightstand and a tall glass of milk. And the tasty cakes and the milk feel better to him than the kiss that his mother used to give him on the forehead before he fell asleep. And I've been eating these things ever since I can remember. And all of a sudden, the doctor says, you know what? No more tasty cakes. You're going to have to change your diet. You're going to have to change your exercise regime. And this is really sad, guys. How many people do you think actually lose a limb because they don't have a level of acceptance with that diagnosis, or lose their eyesight because they don't have an acceptance with that diagnosis? This is not something that is exclusive to addicts and alcoholics. This is a human nature issue. If we have found a comfort zone and someone says that is no longer available to you, we will resist. I want to stay here. I like this. I really don't want to move. Can we figure out a way? Those people begin to negotiate their own safety, and addicts and alcoholics do the exact same thing. So the opposite of acceptance is literally defiance. So if I'm still seeing defiance, the person is not recovering yet. They're abstinent. They haven't gotten high. They're in treatment. They're safer than they've ever been before. But I can't make the mistake of thinking they've entered into recovery. So attitudes is a big deal. So attitudes, behaviors, self-destructive behaviors. In fact, I just talked about some a moment ago. I'm sneaking across campus and I'm getting cigarettes. Self-destructive behavior. I'm not waking up in the morning to be at my groups. I got a certain amount of groups. I only got a certain amount of time to be here. I'm not showing up for my groups. Other behaviors, I'm not taking my medication. Maybe I got more than one diagnosis. So I'm dual diagnosed. I'm struggling with depression, or I'm struggling with anxiety. And I also have the disease of addiction, but I'm refusing to take my medication. I don't like the way the medication makes me feel, so I'm just not showing up for it. I'm not showing up for a consultation and talk about changing medications and doing a different medication. I just ain't showing up. I'm not taking it. They can't make me take it. All of these are behaviors. But there's another one, guys: aggression. So I'm going to use aggression. I'm going to threaten staff. I'm going to threaten patients. I'm going to threaten my parents. I'm going to threaten to hurt myself. Aggression. And aggression is a wonderful form of denial. It keeps people away from you. It's a defense mechanism. Keeps people away so they can't really confront your behavior and what's going on, because they don't want to have to deal with all of the anger and everything that comes with it. So these type of behaviors. Also, one that actually works better than aggression, guys, avoidance. I just don't show up for anything. Very, very, very passive. You say, Mike, what's wrong? I say, I don't know. You say you coming down for dinner? I say, no. How'd you do in school today? Okay. I'm just giving you these one-word answers. I'm not letting you in. We ain't gonna get to a point where we can unpack anything or talk about anything. I'm gonna avoid dealing with it. Well, how you feeling today? I'm fine. And then I'll tell you this, you know what my problem? Only time I feel bad is when you start asking me how I'm feeling. Right? So that's what my problem is. If you stop asking me how I'm feeling, I'll be all right. So avoidance, guys, this one works better than aggression, because with aggression, it's an obvious problem. With avoidance, I'm wondering what I need to do about this. How do I manage this? So all of these things, guys, active change of attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs. Now, that belief system is the one that Dr. Daniels talked about. There's an addictive belief system, and obviously there's a recovering belief system. And a recovering belief system is I can be whatever I choose for myself. I can literally be whatever I choose for myself. And I have the ability to actually create that reality for myself. But that, guys, is talking about a high level of trust. One of the students that was on asked about CBT, and we use both CBT and DBT methods here at Karen to change a person's thought process, how they think about themselves, and then how they respond to those thoughts. Really, really, really important that they begin learning. And this is an easy way to be able to say this, guys. What are we actually trying to teach them, again, without having to take you back to psychology class and all the rest of that stuff? Real bottom line, what are we trying to teach them? Exactly what they missed. To develop the necessary coping skills to emotionally navigate your way through life. Real simple, not very complicated. Develop the necessary coping skills to emotionally navigate your way through life, meaning that I'm going to continue to do what it is that I was designed to do no matter what happens. That doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean it's going to be on schedule, doesn't mean it's going to be with the people I thought it was going to be with or the places I thought it was going to be at. But the level of coping skills that an individual possesses to continue to move forward in spite of any of those circumstances is what you want to create. Now, as a result of the time frame that it actually takes to get a person into treatment, and what do I mean when I say that? The average addict and/or alcoholic has usually been using anywhere from 1 to 3 years before they get into treatment. So are we going to solve all of their emotional entanglements in a 4-week period of time? The answer to that is no. So 28 days goes by. What's the absolute best that we're shooting for at the end of 28 days? The absolute best that happens for a patient in 28 days is they come to the realization, I do have this disease and I need to recover. I don't even have to have decided I want to recover. We got plenty of patients at the end of 28 days ain't decided they want to recover. Now I'm going to share something with you guys, but you can't tell nobody. The patients here lovingly refer to me as Satan in a suit. Now, there's a reason. I do the family education program. Parents' response to their children after the family education program has changed radically. So the child's belief is that Mr. Ode brainwashed my parents. That's what he did. He's a mean individual that has ruined my relationship with my parents. And what he's really ruined is they no longer give me my way out of fear of self-destruction. Most parents give their children their way out of fear of, I'm afraid that you're going to kill yourself. So here, take this. Don't hurt yourself. Here, take this. Don't make it worse. And parents give their children their way out of fear of self-destruction. When that no longer happens, it's at that point, really, guys, the end of treatment here at Karen, and we make the recommendation at the end of this 28 days, this is the work that this individual's done. And this is the work that they still need to do. So we're going to make a recommendation as to what needs to happen next in order to achieve that goal. So if that recommendation is a sober living or a halfway house or whatever that may be, most people at that stage of the game have not committed themselves to recovery. Using, though, has become, for the first time, more difficult than not getting high. With the information that they have and the change in relationship of their family members who are no longer engaged in the process of enabling, using has now become more difficult than not getting high. Now, depending on how rigorously a person dives into that real recovery work is what's going to dictate their risk of relapse. See, if I'm rigorously engaged in doing the work of repairing this fractured character that I've created as a result of my active addiction, then relapse is not going to be inevitable. But an individual,
you do this after 28 days?
Could you repeat that, please?
After 28 days, you come to this, you figure out what the patient needs?
At the end of 28 days, we'll be pretty sure what exactly the patient needs. We'd be able to
But the person is not recovered.
No one is recovered at the end of 28 days.
Right.
Matter of fact, by the end of 28 days, the average patient we have at Karen, I'm starting to think about using. I'm teasing you guys. At the end of 28 days, guys, what has really happened is I've realized a couple of different things. One, the pain that I create for myself by getting high is no longer something I want to engage in. But number two, and this is, again, really difficult, the pain that I create for my family and the way our relationship is now beginning to alter, I'm getting more and more uncomfortable with that fight. And that doesn't mean I'm ready to concede. I might actually say, look, I just don't want to talk to you guys no more. I don't like you no more. Don't call me no more. I don't want to talk to you no more. But it's become far too uncomfortable to maintain what would be considered, and this is important, a healthy relationship with my parents, because now my parents are starting to get healthy. My parents have been through the family education program. My parents are usually going to Al-Anon by now. They're also participating in family support groups, and my parents are starting to become healthy people. So this is no longer a very comfortable relationship for me to be in either. And at that point, recovery actually becomes an option. And I say this in that recovery is actually fairly comfortable compared to the chaos that they've come from. So you get a person into a halfway house. I'm in there with a bunch of individuals that are in the same position that I am. So they've, it feels, not really true, but it feels like I've ruined my future. I don't have a shot at like pulling everything together. Nothing could be further from the truth. Most of them are going to do very well. They're going to succeed at life. But in that early stage, I don't see it very clearly. And I'm also at a spot where I'm trying to figure out how can I take back control of my life? Because right now, it feels like other people have control of my life. The Karen Foundation was dictating how long I was going to stay there. They've actually recommended a place that my parents has agreed, and they sent me there. And this place is now going to dictate how long I'm going to be there. They're also dictating what privileges I have while I'm there, what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do, what I'm given, what I'm not given, all of those things. But what I'm learning in early recovery, I'm actually learning this while I'm still at Karen, which is that I can take control of my life. That all of those things are dictated as a result of my behavior. So if my behavior is appropriate, I can begin gaining the privileges I'd like to have. And that's what I meant when I said, depending on how rigorously a person dives in, the harder I'm working, the more privileges I'm going to gain, the more freedom I'm going to gain. because success is its own motivation. So all I got to do is start doing well for a little while. And I'm actually motivated to do more of that and get more of that. So really important that parents stay the course. And it's falling off that actually causes most of the relapse. Parents sometimes are the ones that relapse. A patient may go into a halfway house and they are originally signed up for the halfway house for 3 months. Well, a month into the halfway house, life shows up and starts getting a little rocky for me. I don't really want to keep fighting. I think I did enough. I'm trying to tell my parents that I don't need to be here anymore. I'm ready to go home. I haven't gotten high for 2 months. I did a month in rehab. I did a month in this halfway house. I'm out of here. This is not what I need. And some parents concede back into their enabling behavior and say, okay, well, I'll bring you home, but you got to do X, Y, and Z or A, B, and C when you back at the house with us. And the patient, even if they have intentions of doing everything right, really don't have the necessary coping skills to make themselves successful and ultimately will end up relapsing, which is how treatment gets a bad name. When people will say, oh, treatment doesn't work. Well, the truth of the matter is, it's the individuals, both the parents and the patient, that have to actually be rigorously working on their own recovery. And they need to do it for what would be considered an appropriate length of time. And what's that actually mean? It really means the same thing for both of them. And what's an appropriate length of time? Just long enough that I've built a solid enough foundation that when things get difficult, I have now a recovery response to difficult times. You see, when a patient leaves treatment, they have more using experience than they do recovering experience. So I'm going to use before I do anything else if left to my own devices. Here's the fun part, guys. How many of you realize when a patient leaves treatment, a parent has more enabling experience than they do recovering experience? So when life gets real difficult, I'm apt to go back to enabling more than I am to lean towards the recovery. So we both need enough time to build a solid enough foundation that I am able to maintain when things get difficult. Because there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it, guys. At some point in this process, things are going to get difficult. And they're not just going to get hard, they're going to get real hard. There are times, that's life. And you guys are experiencing that. If you never used any drugs or alcohol, sometimes life's going great. And this is real fun. Sometimes life is going so good, you can't even believe it. You're driving down the street in your car, looking in the rearview mirror and think, well, maybe Angel Jabril is following me. Hey, my life is great right now. Nothing could possibly go wrong. And other days, you wake up and it feels like you woke up with the devil sitting in the bedroom with you, thinking, you know what? How can I make your life miserable today? And your job is to simply maintain and keep moving forward, because good and bad days both do what? They come and they go. The problem with addicts and or alcoholics is when they have those bad days, their slips take them way off the rails, where you may go off for a day or two and you kind of get yourself back on track and you share with your partner what you were feeling and what you were going through. And you know what? I'm good now. And there are other times that, you don't even get fazed by the bad things, because it's really fun when you look at someone else and you realize, like, wow, I'm glad I actually have a positive attitude, or I'm glad I'm able to practice patience, or I'm glad I'm able to practice humility. So parents have to learn self-reflection so that I'm able to recognize when I'm going back into enabling behavior, right along with patients learning self-reflection so that they recognize when they're going back into self-destructive behavior. Now, as I say all of these things, guys, you want to quite simply recognize the impact that addiction has on an entire family. It doesn't happen to a person in the family. It happens to the whole family. Siblings are impacted because the value system of the family has changed. mom or dad actually lies for the addict or alcoholic. So even though we never told our siblings that lying's okay, yo, you lied. So lying ain't that bad. If there's a reason to lie, then it's okay to lie. Because sometimes we lie. What do I mean when I say that? Our family. Sometimes we don't tell the truth. So it's not like this is happening to one person. This is happening to all of us at the same time. And we need to all enter into a program of our own personal recovery at the same time, because any relapse may actually cause the relapse for the addict or alcoholic back to using drugs and alcohol. As I share with you, enabling relapse may take them back to using drugs and alcohol. So really, really important that the entire family seek treatment and understanding this disease, and recognize that from the onset, as you heard me say when I first started, this is a journey. It's not an event. And the event is not that we corral the patient, we kind of hog tie them and get them up to treatment, and then this family will be okay. Not even close. We need to really be in for the long haul. What is the impact that they're using drugs and alcohol has had on the rest of the family? And what changes do we need to make in order to create what would be considered a long-term recovery plan?